Well, for those of you watching, hopefully it will quit doing that because it's glitching up here. So hopefully it will stop glitching. We're going to read from Psalm chapter 139, verse 17 to 18. I did not type that on the sheets that I gave you. You have sheets there and it has Psalm 139 on it, and I will go to those in just a few moments here. But what we're reading from our text is not on your sheet. So it is actually verses 17 to 18 in Psalm 139. Probably the most popular chapter to read on this special day. And so it is often read by many people. I'm looking at it just a little bit differently today. Starting with verse 17, how precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they are more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am still with thee. I love how the psalm writer has a way of really developing the relationship between us and God. How we view God, how God views us, the attitude of God towards us. Last year on Sanctity of Life Sunday, I did the message, Sanctity, a Personal Approach. I looked at it kind of from my idea, from what I think about the issue. And I kind of, and this is very, very new in attitude. Some of these things I copied from prior messages, but the idea of this was actually being typed this morning while Matthew was trying to get in the church building. And so it is very, very new in the thought, because I kept thinking, Lord, what do I want to do with this? It was January 22nd, 1972, 51 years ago today. Today is the official anniversary of probably the worst court decision ever made in the United States of America. We know it as Roe v. Wade. Since 1980, and this was done a while back, there has been 4,257 babies a day, 177 per hour, 3 every minute. You think about how many minutes you have sat in church today, some 43. We were here longer than that, but I mean during church service. Some 43 minutes. On the average, 3 babies, every single one of those minutes was murdered, okay, at the hands of abortion doctors. Now, things somewhat changed. They have not been fixed. But on June 24th of last year, 2022, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Now, a lot of Christian people that are not involved in the Right to Life movement believed that that ended abortion. Far, far from it. Okay? Far, far from it. But what it did was it changed the pathway so that states could make their own rules in how this was taking place. So there was no federal law that said the states just had to accept that law. It made it where states were able to say, no, we will no longer allow this. And that has caused some decrease in abortions. The attitude of if the unborn and the elderly, see, we don't have to worry about the unborn, but I'll tell you something about the way things move in society. If you allow them to come after the unborn, us old folks are next. That's the way that it works. They're not going to stop in the attitude of saying, we're only going handicapped and the terminally ill, and that those people are only a problem and with no value, and we need to just do away with them so that we can have the fresh young people that are vibrant to be able to operate in our society. And we are taught that. Some church denominations even have that attitude. When you get a little bit older, especially in ministry, they'll put you out to pasture so that they can bring in somebody young to do the job. I love young people, don't take me wrong in that, but often that's why we're in the mess that we're in, is because those young people are being trained in our Christian colleges and seminaries that have nothing to do with Christian whatsoever. And that's why the churches are in trouble. God actually addresses this. Exodus chapter 4, verse 11. And the Lord said unto him, Who hath made man's mouth? Or who maketh the dumb or deaf or the seeing or the blind? Have not I the Lord? So the Lord doesn't just make perfect human beings. The Lord makes human beings that can't walk, can't talk, can't hear, can't see. And they are just as valuable to him as the ones that we would say were normal or perfect. Okay? God makes that very, very clear. Several years ago, a fragile young woman came to this is written by a doctor. Okay, so when it says it's talking about the doctor. My office, expecting her first baby. 1 month before she was due, the baby was in a breech position. The death rate of breech babies is high because of the difficulty of delivering the after-coming head and the imperative need of delivering it quickly after the body is born. During the delivery, I waited as patiently as I could for the natural forces of expulsion to thoroughly dilate the firm maternal structures. At last, the time had come, and I gently drew down on the little foot. I grasped the other, but it would not come beside the first one. To my consternation, I saw the other little foot would never be beside the first one. The entire thigh from the hip to the knee was missing. I knew what a dreadful effect this would have upon the unstable nervous system of the mother. The family would almost certainly impoverish itself in taking the child to every famous orthopedist in the world. I saw this little girl sitting sadly by herself while the other girls danced and ran and played. I could slow my hand. I could delay those few short moments no one in this world would ever know. The mother, after the first shock of grief, would be glad she had lost a child so handicapped. The little pink foot on the good side bobbed out from its protecting towel and pressed firmly against my slowing, moving hand, into whose keeping the safety of the mother and baby had been entrusted. I couldn't do it. I delivered the baby with her pitiful little leg. Every foreboding came true. The mother was in the hospital several months. She looked like a wraith of her former. As the years went on, I blamed myself bitterly for not having had the strength to yield to my temptation. Our hospital stages an elaborate Christmas party each year for the staff. This past year, 3 lovely young musicians on the stage played softly in unison with the organ. I was especially fascinated by the young harpist. She played extraordinarily well, as if she loved it. Her slender fingers flicked across the strings, and her face was upturned as if the world at that moment were a wonderful and holy place. When the short program was over, there came running down the aisle a woman I did not recognize. "Oh, you saw her," she cried. "You must have recognized your baby." That was my daughter who played the harp, the little girl who was born with only one good leg 17 years ago. We tried everything at first, but now she has a whole artificial leg on that side. Best of all, through all those years, she learned to use her hands so wonderfully. She is going to be one of the world's greatest harpists. She is my whole life, and now she is so happy, and here she is. The sweet young girl had quietly approached us, her eyes glowing. Impulsively, I took the child in my arms. Across her young, warm shoulders, I saw the creeping clock of the delivery room 17 years before. I lived again those awful moments of life where her life was in my hand. As the last strains of silent night faded, I found the comfort I had waited for so long. So do we have the right to decide who lives and who dies? Do we have the right, or do we have the ability to know what kind of things is really important? Are babies with these kinds of issues, are they important? Or are they to be looked upon as just waste that we can simply throw away? You see, we can't see in the future, and we don't know what God is going to do. And the reality is God has used some of those very babies to change the world in ways that we couldn't ever imagine. And society says that they're just a waste. We try to use this attitude, it's my body, and so it's my choice. Murdering the baby doesn't fix the that causes child abuse. Then you shift it to the elderly. I have been faced, and I have said I don't ever want to be power of attorney for anyone ever again. I had to be power of attorney for my mother. I had to be power of attorney for my older brother. And in both situations, I had to make a decision that said we are not going to extend the major treatment to them because that was their wishes to not do that. There is a big difference between, and I want to be careful not to get myself into a bad situation here. I've already been in bad situations all week long. I don't want to get into a bad situation. There's a big difference between saying we will allow someone to die with dignity and to say to them, we are not going to hook them onto ventilators, or we are not going to have you electric shock their hearts to bring them back to life. That's a decision that we make, that we choose to do. I have told my kids, if I die and that means that I go to heaven and you bring me back to life, I'm going to haunt you for the rest of eternity. Because I do not want to do that. There's a big difference in that and assisting someone to die. So when I say, okay, I'm going to withhold food from you so that you will die, that's a totally different thing than saying, I don't want you to electric shock me back to life again. Am I making sense in what I'm saying in that? Because I want to make sure that we're clear on that. What the state wants to do, what they have been trying to do for a long time, I'm not talking about Iowa, I'm talking about the governmental state. They've been trying to do this for a long time. They've been trying to make it where old people just need to die and get out of the way so that the young people can live and not have to put up with taking care of the old people. That's totally different than saying, I'm not going to hook you up to a ventilator. And so we get caught up in these arguments because we don't understand what the argument really is. And so we say, well, I want to allow my loved one not to have to go through all of these life-saving measures. That's not the same. The state wants to kill them. That's the attitude that is there to get them out of the way. I could back that up, but I'm not going to take the time to do that. So you can say we don't trust you, and that's fine. The first to be killed in Nazi Germany were the infirm, the senile, the mentally retarded, the aged, and the defective children. Eventually, as World War II approached, the doomed undesirables included epileptics, children with badly modeled ears. Their ears were out of shape. And bedwetters. Transportation of the patients, quote, quote, to the killing centers was carried out by the charitable transport company for the sick. The plan then became to kill all Jews and all Polish people, and to cut down the Russian population by 30 million. So it develops into this attitude. We'll just get rid of the undesirables, the ones that we just don't think fit up to our normal. And pretty soon we're getting rid of anybody that we think is less than us. And it's a scary thing when the government or some kingdom or whatever can determine whether you are worthy of life or not. When that happens, we will have mass destruction. Now, what is the church's response to these situations? We're all struck by this great Holocaust and wonder how it ever could have happened. Leo Alexander, who was consultant to the Secretary of War and on duty with the Office of Chief Counselor for War Crimes in Nuremberg, says that what happened in Nazi Germany all started with the acceptance of the attitude that there is such a thing as a life not worthy to be lived. An elderly German man who lived through the Holocaust tells the following story. This was a Christian man. Okay? I always considered myself a Christian. I attended a church since I was a small boy. We had heard the stories of what was happening to the Jews, but like most people in America today, we tried to distance ourselves from the reality of what was really taking place. What could anyone do to stop it? A railroad track ran behind our small church, and each Sunday morning we would hear the whistle from a distance and then the clacking of the wheels moving over the track. We became disturbed when one Sunday we heard cries coming from the train as it passed by. We grimly realized that the train was carrying Jews. Week after week, that train whistle would blow. We would dread to hear the sound of those old wheels because we knew that the Jews would begin to cry out to us as they passed our church. It was so terribly disturbing. We could do nothing to help these poor people, yet their screams tormented us. We knew at exactly what time the whistle would blow, and we decided the only way to keep from being so disturbed by the cries was to start singing louder. If their screams reached our ears, we'd just sing a little louder and we could hear them no more. Years have passed and no one talks about it much anymore, but I still hear that train whistle in my sleep. I can still hear them crying out for help. God forgive all of us who called ourselves Christians, yet did nothing to intervene. I chose upbeat songs this morning. I did that intentionally. I wanted to sing upbeat songs this morning. You all know that I have a problem with my hand, and so I have gotten some spray that really helps that, to make that feeling on the strings. And so we sang an extra verse of the one song, I forget which one it was, and I was ready to sing another verse of the last song too and just do that over again, because I love music. To me, the music is not just something that you do to get to the message. The music is every bit a part. And I'll tell you as a preacher that if the music goes well in a service, the preaching is a whole lot easier to do than what it is if the music is dead. When the music is dead, you feel like you're up here on a motorcycle trying to kick that Kickstarter over and over again, trying to get something going. When there has been worship and praise to God, it just is so easy just to walk up here and take off preaching, because that sets the mindset and the mood for it. It's a wonderful thing. But I have used that story a lot. In fact, I tried to write that story for the denomination that I was involved in at the time. I was on the committee for our new denominational magazine. And I wrote that story, and the editor of the magazine said, "We're not going to print that story because that makes it feel like that the church failed." Yeah, the church did fail. Does that mean we're beating them down or judging them or looking? No, that doesn't mean that at all. But we realize if we take the attitude, the world is dying around us, and we just sing a little bit louder so that it blocks out the cries of the world around us, something is desperately wrong with who we are. If we can do that, something is desperately wrong with who we are. I think we need to be alert all of the time. The man this morning was walking down the sidewalk. I had dropped Matthew off to take his food over there. I was walking from the house towards the church. And I have seen this man before, and he walks very rapidly. And I thought, I'm not in the mood to try to outwalk him. And so I stopped and said, "You go ahead and go on by, because you're going to walk a whole lot faster than I am, and I have no interest in walking that fast." And he struck up a conversation with me. And so we ended up walking together to the church. I've seen the man, but I've never talked to him, so I don't know him. I don't know his personality. I found out very rapidly that he's pretty ornery. Can I just say it that way? He's pretty ornery. But we smiled together as I got ready to turn here into the church, and he went on down the street, and it's like, "You have a good day, you too." And you think for a moment in time that God gives you an opportunity to hear somebody's cry. Listen, Mike Merle. Listen, Pastor. Hear the voice of the community that doesn't know me and that needs a relationship with me. Listen to the voice of the people that are crying out, that are sitting in their houses, doped up beyond imagination, or they have been abused and mistreated by somebody that they loved, or they have been given divorce papers and told that they no longer have a family, or whatever it is that they are hurting in the middle of. And modern church just says, well, let's sing a little bit louder so that we can drown out their cries. God's thoughts are great towards you, and God has loved you since before you were even conceived. I took these verses, I'm just going to hit them kind of quickly. That's why I gave them to you, so that you had them. You didn't have to try to write them down or anything like that. You have them. Psalms 100 verse 3. Know ye that the Lord, He is God. It is He that hath made us, not we ourselves. We are His people, and the sheep of His pasture. Psalm 127:3. Lo, children are a heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is His reward. It's not a chunk of flesh. It's a reward from God. Isaiah 44:24. Thus saith the Lord thy Redeemer, and He that formed thee from the womb. I am the Lord that maketh all things. Isaiah 64:8. But now, O Lord, thou art our Father. We are the clay, and thou art the potter, and we all are the work of thy hand. I love this one because this is written by Apostle Paul, who once was named Saul. And Saul was one of the greatest persecutors of the church that has ever been. But when it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb, that's even knowing that he would become a Christian killer. Paul is saying that I was separated from my mother's womb and called me by His grace. Jeremiah had a similar testimony in chapter 1, verses 4-7. Then the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. You can read the rest of that for yourself. Psalms 22, verses 6-11. I'm going to read the bottom part that is underlined. I again encourage you to read the entire thing. But thou art He that took me out of the womb. Thou didst make me hope when I was upon my mother's breast. I was cast upon thee from the womb. Thou art my God from my mother's belly. Psalm 58, verses 1-4. Again, let's just look at the bottom part of this. The wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they be born, speaking lies. So it works both ways, doesn't it? Psalm 71:6. By thee have I been holden up from the womb. Thou art He that take me out of my mother's bowels. And then all of Psalm 139, and we read those few verses as our text. This is the verses right before the text. For thou possessed my reins. Thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, and curiously wrought in the lower parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance yet being imperfect, and in thy book all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. Before you was even formed, you was written in the book of Almighty God. And then the psalmist went on to say, He knows your thoughts, and His thoughts towards you are wonderful. I know this so very well. One of the devil's greatest weapons is to try to get us to believe that we are failures, losers, below good enough, not adequate. We let God down, and then the devil comes in with all of his forces to try to tell us how bad we are. And God could never love us because we have failed, and so now we're just in trouble. I deal with that with young people all of the time. I spend lots of time on the computer trying to tell young people that is a lie from the devil. It is a lie from the devil. You cannot accept that. You are precious to God. And God knew you before your parents were even born, let alone before you were even born. God knew you, and He knew exactly who you were going to be with all of your flaws. I say that to people all the time. Why would God call me to be a minister for Him? He knows all of my flaws and weaknesses. Why would He call me to do that? Well, Mike, he knew that before I was even thought of. He knew what my weaknesses were going to be. And He has ultimate long-suffering and patience to do. Sometimes I get that, and I used to make people mad when I told them that. God has a frying pan, and it has my name on it, and He's not afraid to use it. It's like, if you just keep wanting to be this way, wham! When are you going to wake up? And He does that sometimes. Praise His name, He does that sometimes. Sometimes we need that wake-up call that says, hey, but He doesn't do that because He's mad at me. Because if He was mad at me, I would be in big, big trouble. He does that because He loves us. He says that in Revelation, I chastise who I love. So those of us that He loves, sometimes He has to get our attention and wake us back up. But He has never, ever, ever forsaken, ever, ever. And sometimes I tell Him He should. This week I told Him He should. And He graciously doesn't listen. He just loves you. Because His thoughts towards you are good. If you're going to mess up and you're going to rebel against Him, He'll give you the wake-up call. So I'm not justifying our sin. I'm not justifying our wrong attitudes. I'm not doing any, but God knew what my attitudes were going to be before I was even conceived. And He called me into the ministry anyway. Why are you saying that, Mike? Why do you keep saying that over and over? Because God, no matter what flaws you can lift up to Him, no matter what weaknesses you can lift up to Him, no matter what you can say, well, I don't understand this, or I don't know this, or I don't, and all of those things you can lift up to Him, and God says, but I will use you anyway. Because if I can't use you any other way, when you are so out of your mind on Sunday and everything has gone wrong and you know you're not ready to get up and preach and you know that you're not ready to play the guitar and sing and you've got your mind all wrapped up in all of these things you need to do, I'll send a guy down the sidewalk for you to talk to. So no matter what you are going through, God's thoughts towards you, He knew you before you were even formed. Why do we believe so firmly that the sanctity of life is so important? Because the devil knows if he can do away with our attitude of the sanctity of life, we're finished. We're finished. I want to sing loud. I can't sing loud anymore. I have to sing the best that my voice will come out. But I want to sing loud, and I love to sing loud. And I go around the house over there, and if you ever come up to my window, you will think I have lost my mind, because sometimes I'm just singing loud. And it doesn't make any difference to me whether I'm on key or whatever. I'm just having a good time singing loud. But God help me to never just sing loud, to cover up the voice of the world that is hurting around me. Let me sing loud so that my praises go out into that world and give them hope that they realize that there's a God that can help them no matter what they are going through. Because God doesn't care if you have a perfect body in perfect shape with everything in order, or if you are a Down syndrome baby, or a baby that is missing a leg. God doesn't care about that part of things as far as his love for you and his willingness to use you, because he will, no matter what your flaws are. So the world will say, well, that means you'll never be anything. And God smiles, because he's used some of the least of these to make the biggest difference, including in my life. Including in my life. Praise his name. Father, you know this is something that I am just tremendously passionate about. It is something that causes my heart to beat, to get me up, to get me thinking. I'm sorry to you that sometimes I get wrapped up in myself, and I get wrapped up in what is going on around me, and I begin to look at all of the flaws and the weaknesses. I'm sorry that happens. Thank you for reminding me this morning of how you can just bring about something right in the middle of the absolute tornado going on around us. And you can bring a reminder of the work that you can accomplish in a given situation. We pray that you would encourage us to remember, first of all, that you love us and your thoughts towards us are good and you want what is best for us. It is the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. That's what Luke 12:32 reminds us of. You want to do that. We also recognize that we live in a fallen world, and all of the things that you intend don't manifest themselves because of that. But don't let us get down and discouraged because of that. Let us be reminded again that every single life, no matter what they are, who they are, what they have gone through, what they experience in their body or their emotion, no matter what they are precious to you. And Lord, help us to always be reminded, just as you love us with all of our flaws, it is our job to love them with all of theirs. We praise you and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for your patience. There's plenty of food over there, I'm sure. You are dismissed.